I wonder what kind of adult my grandson John will become. Today, he injured a younger student at school. But John doesn't seem to feel any remorse. He acts on his emotions and doesn't know how to control his anger. If this continues, John might do something truly irreversible. That night, in the quiet bedroom where only the sound of the air purifier could be heard, I looked down at John. I could hear his faint breathing. Watching John sleep with a peaceful and innocent expression, my heart froze at the coldness of the knife I was holding in my right hand. Staring at the sharp blade, thoughts of wanting to free John from his suffering raced through my mind. Clenching my teeth, I gripped my wrist, holding the knife tightly with my other hand. Mixed feelings of love, hatred, and sadness overwhelmed me, and I didn't know what to do. Trying desperately to calm my trembling body and erratic breathing, I closed my eyes.
I'm sorry. I can't take it anymore.
I raised the knife above John with both hands.
This is the only way. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
My name is Elena. Now, I live with just my husband Andrew. Since Andrew is about to retire, he always finishes work on time. We enjoy leisurely dinners together at home and take walks on weekends, leading a peaceful life. Both of us are healthy, the mortgage is paid off, and our children are independent. I never doubted that my old age would be positive and fulfilling. My daughter Samantha works in fashion, traveling frequently to Europe for work. Samantha decided not to marry from a young age. It's not out of bravado. I truly respect Samantha for living with pride in her work. On the other hand, my son Nathan got married at 28 and has been living in the neighboring town since then. For about 10 years after their marriage, Nathan and his wife Clara were not blessed with children. It seemed that Clara was more troubled by this than Nathan. Nathan would say,
"Children aren't something you should rush to have. I think the time will come eventually."
Occasionally, they would visit our house, and Nathan would bring up the topic of not having children, almost as if it were someone else's problem. He didn't need to mention it, but after 10 years without children, maybe people were saying something. Andrew and I pretended not to care. As long as Nathan and Clara were happy together, that was enough. Nathan would say,
"Clara is always telling me not to drink or stay up late. She's like a nagging mom."
Clara would smile shyly and look down. I felt that Clara's wishes were behind her requests for Nathan not to drink or stay up late, even if Nathan didn't realize it. 10 years is a long time. I remember the day Nathan and Clara told us they were expecting a baby. They used to visit us once a month, but suddenly they stopped coming, and I felt a bit uneasy. A few months later, they visited again, and Nathan seemed embarrassed, which made me think something was up. Nathan said,
"Well, Clara is pregnant. Finally."
Clara's belly wasn't very big yet, so she didn't look pregnant. But seeing Clara gently caress her belly with a calm and kind smile brought tears to my eyes. Clara asked,
Oh, what's wrong, Elena?
I replied, No, it's strange. I'm not sad. I'm happy. I'm really happy. I repeated to myself that I was happy. I couldn't put it into words, but I was genuinely glad that Clara was going to have a child. Clara's expression as she caressed her belly was the happiest I had ever seen her, and I knew I would never forget it. The child who was born was named John. I thought from the bottom of my heart that the name John suited my grandson, who had a smile as lovely as an angel. Since Clara's family lived far away, She didn't go back to her parents' home, but stayed with us for a while. The feel of a baby after such a long time was so soft that I was scared to hold him. I held the fragile life and gazed at John's face.
You've raised kids before, so why are you so scared to hold him?
Well, it's different. He's someone else's child. I'm afraid I might hurt him, even by accident.
I smiled wryly as I supported John with all my strength. The tension was completely different from when I raised Nathan and Samantha. John, sleeping in my arms, was fragile, delicate, and yet beautiful. John grew up quickly. At 4 years old, he loved picture books and would devour the books he borrowed from the library. Nathan would always proudly report this to us.
At this rate, he'll become a scholar or something.
As long as he follows the path he loves, that's all that matters. As long as he's happy.
Clara looked at young John with narrowed eyes. Watching her profile, I sincerely hoped that this happiness would last forever. One day, the phone rang at home. Andrew had retired and, without any particular hobbies, spent most of his days at home. He quickly picked up the phone when it rang.
Hello?
Andrew responded with a wary voice, cautious of scams or sales calls. I was watching TV, just a typical moment in our daily life. Holding the receiver to his ear, Andrew stared at me, and even when our eyes met, he continued to stare without looking away. I felt that nothing was reflected in Andrew's eyes. From those lifeless eyes, I realized that something terribly bad had happened. The call on that ordinary day was to inform us that Clara and John had been in an accident and were taken to the hospital. It happened on their way home from kindergarten. They might have been talking about what to have for dinner or drawing at home. I imagined Clara talking to John as they walked hand in hand. Then, they reached a crosswalk, checked the green light, and started walking. It was all in my imagination, but it felt so real. A car driven by a drowsy driver, the two of them being thrown into the air. Clara instinctively cradling John's head before they hit the ground. Andrew and I rushed to the hospital where they were taken after receiving a call from Nathan. We sat silently in the waiting room. The image of Clara and John being hit by a car kept replaying in my mind, and I covered my face repeatedly.
Why did this happen?
Eventually, the doctor informed us that Clara had passed away. Nathan was speechless, standing in the hallway with a fixed expression. Only John survived, but the doctor's words about the possibility of a traumatic brain injury didn't seem to reach him. When I held Andrew's hand, he too stared into the void with his mouth half open. Before the feeling of sadness could arise, the funeral arrangements proceeded. After Clara's funeral, Nathan asked us to take care of John.
I'm sorry. Just for a little while. I need some time alone to think after losing Clara.
What about John's feelings while you're thinking alone?
Nathan was so downcast that I couldn't even muster the will to ask that question. Diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, John lost his previously gentle personality and began to exhibit violent behavior and outbursts. At first, I thought it was the sadness and loneliness of losing Clara that changed John's personality, but that might not be the case. John, who suffered brain damage from the injury, was struggling with the symptoms of a traumatic brain injury, and neither Andrew, Nathan, nor I could understand him. John would break and throw furniture while shouting, and sometimes he would be violent towards me. Nathan and Andrew would observe John from a distance, frowning, and then leave the house to escape. My worries continued until John, exhausted from his rampages, fell asleep. During those days, only Samantha, who lived far away, would call me every day to check on me.
I'm sorry, Mom. I'm overseas now, but I'll definitely visit when I return.
Hearing Samantha's voice would soothe my heart a little. I was at an age where society would call me elderly. Spending all day with a young and violent grandson was mentally and physically exhausting. The stormy days with John continued, and the time for him to start elementary school was approaching. During his time in kindergarten, John caused problems with his violence and abusive language, and I had to apologize repeatedly. I wondered if I had ever apologized so much in my life. At first, everyone offered sympathetic words, but gradually, people began to avoid John and me. Even Clara's friends, who had been close to her, started to avoid us, deepening our isolation. The kindergarten teachers made various accommodations, but John, who couldn't move his body as freely as the other children, was always frustrated. When I went to pick him up from kindergarten, I saw John watching an active boy on the monkey bars. The boy, with his handsome face, completed the monkey bars with ease and laughed with his friends, clapping their hands.
Grandma, watch me.
John tried his best to grab the bars, but he seemed to just hang there without much momentum. The boy who had completed the monkey bars began to mimic John. He lightly gripped the bars and extended one leg, mocking John. The other children whispered and laughed as they watched. Eventually, losing interest in John, the boys moved on to other playground equipment, laughing and having fun. John, with tears welling up in his eyes, punched me in the stomach. Sometimes John's violence was directed at other children. I told Nathan that it would be better for John to attend a special support class in elementary school. But both Nathan and even Andrew opposed the idea.
John may be a bit hysterical, but he doesn't need to be in a special support class. Those classes are for children with disabilities, right? I don't think it's that bad.
Traumatic brain injury is not easily visible. Nathan and Andrew, who spent little time with John, didn't seem to understand the severity of the situation. I repeatedly explained that John's outbursts were troubling others and, more importantly, causing him distress. But they refused to accept it. It seemed to me that they were closing their eyes to the fact that their beloved John, Nathan's son, was disabled. As John grew, his violence worsened. Even as bruises increased on my arms and thighs, Nathan and Andrew pretended not to notice. I tried to seek help from the authorities to improve the situation. But when I approached them, they told me to have the father come to the office. Nathan showed no understanding of John's disability and might not even know the term traumatic brain injury. The school called almost daily, and I apologized to many people. Days passed without anyone to rely on. John was always irritable, pulling my hair and continuing his violence. I was very tired, to the point where I no longer even felt the desire to seek help from anyone. One day, when John was in the 4th grade, he caused a serious injury to a younger student at school. I heard the details from his homeroom teacher. Apparently, while a younger boy was climbing the stairs, John pushed him. Other students witnessed the incident, and there was no doubt that John was responsible. Even when asked for a reason, John couldn't explain, leaving his teacher perplexed. I hurried to apologize to the injured boy's family. As soon as I saw the parents' faces at the door, I desperately apologized. The boy had broken a bone. At the entrance, the boy's parents yelled at me, asking why neither John nor his parents had come. The boy, wearing a cast, tearfully accused me, saying it hurt a lot and he was scared. I kept apologizing over and over. When the boy's father threw a parting remark at me, asking why a child like John was in a regular class, My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Back home, I cooked in the kitchen. While making John's favorite soup, I chopped the carrots into small pieces to make it easier for him to eat. John clumsily held the spoon and ate the soup. I picked up the spoon that fell from his hand multiple times, and eventually, he threw the spoon at me in anger. With a feeling that was neither anger nor sadness, I handed him a new spoon and quietly looked at his face. I wondered what kind of adult he would become. He didn't seem to reflect on his actions, even after hurting someone. He acted on his emotions and didn't know how to control his anger. At this rate, John might do something truly irreversible. That night, in the quiet bedroom where only the sound of the air purifier could be heard, I looked down at John. I could hear his faint breathing. Watching John sleep with a peaceful and innocent expression, my heart froze at the coldness of the knife I was holding in my right hand. Staring at the sharp blade, the thought of wanting to free John from his suffering raced through my mind. Clenching my teeth, I gripped my wrist, holding the knife tightly with my other hand. Mixed feelings of affection, hatred, and sadness overwhelmed me, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. Trying desperately to control my trembling body and erratic breathing, I closed my eyes.
I'm sorry. I can't take it anymore.
I raised the knife above John with both hands.
This is the only way. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Hey! What are you doing, Elena?
Andrew suddenly entered the room and, seeing the knife in my hand, looked shocked. I stopped moving and turned to look at Andrew. He stood at the door, staring at me with frightened eyes. My hands trembled, and doubt filled my heart. It was only a few seconds, I think. Nathan, who appeared from behind Andrew, rushed past me with a fierce expression and threw himself over John. If I lowered the knife now, I would stab Nathan. Nathan looked at me with a face twisted in fear.
Mom, please stop. I'm begging you.
John, who had woken up by then, looked at me with surprised eyes, unable to understand the situation. He didn't make a sound, just silently stared at me through the gap in Nathan's body. I wondered how I looked in John's eyes at that moment. Seeing John with unusually clear eyes, I came to my senses. Slowly placing the knife on the floor, I left the room without saying a word. My body felt incredibly heavy. Oh, why does my body feel so heavy? I called the police with my smartphone in the living room. My heart was crushed by despair and regret. I wanted someone to punish me for what I had tried to do, for the terrible thing I had almost done. I felt that if someone didn't stop me now, I might do the same thing again. A police officer asked me what had happened. I couldn't say anything and just watched the hands of the clock on the wall.
Elena, hang up the phone!
Andrew said, following me with a pained expression. I lost my strength, moved the phone away from my ear, and started to cry.
It's okay, Elena. Nothing happened. That's fine, right?
Andrew said. Large tears fell from my eyes and landed at my feet. Gathering my strength while staring at the tears on the floor, I put the phone back to my ear.
I tried to hurt my grandson. I'm sorry.
I looked up. Andrew, standing in front of me, looked like he was about to cry.
If you're going to make that face, you should have noticed earlier,
I said. Andrew walked over and hugged me tightly.
It's not too late. Call the police and tell them you made a mistake.
Andrew whispered painfully in my ear. I pushed away from Andrew's chest and tried to smile. I didn't need a mirror to know that my smile must have looked terrible.
No, if you and Nathan hadn't come at that moment, I surely would have.
A few minutes later, several police officers arrived at the house, and I was arrested. While being taken to the patrol car, I kept my eyes closed. Reflecting deeply on my crime, I remembered John's eyes staring at me. Remembering his innocent eyes, tears began to flow from the corners of my closed eyes. At the police station, a young female officer asked me about the incident. The questioning continued for several days, and I told as much detail as I could. Feeling the weight of my crime, I even wished to be put in prison. The officer listened to my story with a sympathetic expression.
It's okay. Take your time,
she said gently when I struggled to speak. An attorney, whom I hadn't even requested, came and listened to my story with genuine concern. It's okay. I can stay in prison for the rest of my life, I said. The attorney smiled at me with a slightly troubled look.
Don't forget that there are people running around trying to defend you,
the attorney advised me. The feelings I had when I tried to hurt John was not just a momentary lapse. If I returned to life with John, I might eventually. After spending 3 days in the detention center, I was allowed to go home. Samantha was waiting in the police station parking lot. I was surprised that it was Samantha, not Andrew or Nathan, who came to pick me up, but I was genuinely glad it was her. I was surprised to see Samantha back here, since she had been living overseas, but as soon as she saw me she ran over and gave me a hug. As soon as she saw me, she ran over and hugged me.
Mom, it must have been tough. It's okay now,
Samantha said.
Samantha, what about your job?
I asked.
Don't worry about that. It doesn't matter,
she replied. Samantha's warmth was so comforting that I was at a loss for words as emotions welled up inside me. Without saying anything, Samantha put me in the passenger seat and drove off without mentioning our destination. After driving for a while, a huge lake that looked like the sea came into view. The clear blue surface of the lake reflected the surrounding mountains, creating a mystical atmosphere. Many flowers were planted along the roadside, and rows of trees stretched endlessly.
That night, I asked Dad and Nathan to check on you,
Samantha said.
What?
I replied. Samantha adjusted her sunglasses while holding the steering wheel with one hand. The reflection of the sun on the lake was so bright that I stopped looking ahead and instead gazed at Samantha's profile. I had been talking to Samantha almost every day. I had spoken to her that night too, but I couldn't remember what we talked about. But I probably vented about my current life. Living with John was reaching its limit. John had grown so much that I could no longer control him on my own. If he continues to grow, he might become an irreparable person. So I thought, maybe it would be better if. Maybe I confided in Samantha because she was living abroad and couldn't do anything about it.
That day, you didn't seem like yourself. You seemed cornered and desperate,
Samantha said. That night, after John had injured a classmate at school, I realized how much trouble he was causing everyone. The sad eyes of the injured boy and the resentful looks from his parents made me feel like I was the one to blame for not raising John properly.
It's my fault! Clara is no longer here. I have to be John's mother,
I said.
Mom, you're not John's mother,
Samantha said firmly, keeping her eyes on the road. Eventually, the car slowed down at a red light, and Samantha gently placed her hand on mine, which was resting on my lap.
Mom, you're not John's parents. You don't need to push yourself so hard,
she said.
But I don't know what to do,
I replied.
I'm sorry, Mom. But I wish you had relied on me more,
Samantha said. Even with her sunglasses on, I could tell she was crying.
I couldn't rely on you. I just couldn't,
I said. But I was so happy that Samantha, who was supposed to be working abroad, had dropped everything to come to me. With a choked voice, I whispered, "Thank you." I didn't care where the car was headed. My heart was so full that I felt sleepy and quietly closed my eyes. Later, I learned that neither Andrew nor Nathan knew I was taking care of John alone. During the police interrogation, Andrew said,
"I thought Nathan was helping."
And Nathan said,
I thought Dad was with him.
Both Andrew and Nathan were avoiding facing John properly and leaving it to each other. Samantha was furious. After the incident, I started living in an apartment that Samantha arranged for me. A few months after the incident, when I met Andrew and Nathan for the first time in a while, they tearfully expressed their regret. Andrew said,
"Elena, I'm really sorry. We left John to you alone."
Nathan added,
I'm sorry too. I was so caught up in losing Clara that I neglected my responsibilities as a father.
Their remorse was genuine, but there was another reason for their dejection. The incident had become a local news story. Neighbors were interviewed on TV, and our house was the center of attention for a while. The school strongly recommended that John be transferred to a special support class, considering his situation. Although Andrew and Nathan had previously opposed the idea, they were persuaded by many school officials, and John was moved to a different class. Initially, John was unhappy about being treated differently, but he has since adapted and is living more peacefully. Andrew and Nathan were sternly warned by their companies to pay more attention to their families and were almost forced to leave work on time. John was not present during our meeting. When I asked about him, Nathan smiled lightly and said,
Clara's parents moved nearby, so they are taking care of him now.
Andrew added,
"It's been really tough for Nathan and me to take care of John. He gets angry and hits us, so Clara's parents have been a great help."
While they were genuinely grateful to Clara's parents, I couldn't help but think that if they had realized this sooner and helped me, things might have been different. As I was thinking this, both Andrew and Nathan apologized simultaneously. Nathan said,
I'm really sorry.
Andrew added,
"If you ever feel ready, we can try living together again."
I couldn't bear to listen to the rest of his words. I still don't have the courage to face John. When I think about that night, my hands tremble. The peaceful sleeping face and the cold knife. And those innocent eyes peeking through Nathan's arms as he tried to protect John. John might not understand the meaning of what I tried to do that night. For a while, no one spoke, and silence filled the room. Samantha gently placed her hand on my shoulder and stroked it softly. She said,
Dad and Nathan haven't forgotten all the things she's done for the family. Mom, take your time and rest now.
Samantha. I replied. Samantha continued.
Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. What's important is to learn and grow from them, right?
Encouraged by Samantha, both Andrew and Nathan nodded in agreement. Perhaps if I had been more open about my struggles with the family from the beginning, things might have turned out differently. From now on, we need to talk openly about John, myself, and everyone else. Samantha reassured me.
It's okay, Mom. You can do it.
Her smile was so bright that I couldn't help but smile back. Considering my situation and John's feelings, my sentence was suspended. Sometimes, I make homemade dishes. Fried chicken, which Samantha and Nathan loved as children, is one of them. The fried chicken I put in a container reaches John through Samantha, and he happily devours it. John says,
If I try harder, I can see Grandma again, right?
Now, John is undergoing proper rehabilitation under the guidance of specialists to live well despite his physical limitations. He might not be able to do the monkey bars like other kids or climb stairs as quickly, but he is moving forward. Tomorrow will surely be a better day than today. Life is a battle against difficulties. Everyone faces obstacles and hardships. Gaining understanding and cooperation from those around you is not impossible. There will always be someone who supports you. No matter how much you want to run away, having someone by your side to share your struggles can be a great relief. After making fried chicken and cleaning the kitchen, I suddenly remember John's smile. If John smiles while eating the fried chicken I made, I will be happy. Imagining the day we can all live together again, I quietly close my eyes.
How was this story? Please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.